Hello, everyone, and good morning. We have our gold sponsor sessions going on right now. Once again, you have the choice which room to go into, and we've got tons of people in here right now, so this is awesome. This gold sponsor session, a big shout out to Prepared. Thank you very, very much for being a gold sponsor. And we have Sandra Wesley who's going to be doing her session here, and it's called Beyond the Call: Leveraging AI and Real-Time Data to Revolutionize 911 Dispatch. Take it away, my friend.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone who has decided to attend this session. I know you have a lot of great choices, and what a great platform, really, that he's been able to put this together, and everybody can attend some free training. So as everyone is starting to come in the room, I'm just going to take a moment here and ask you about you. Okay. So much it's always focused on me, me, me. I want to know about you, you, you. So while we're waiting on everyone to come in, if you could in the chat, will you at least tell me where you're from and what year you began your career in public safety? I would be very intrigued to know, especially, maybe you actually knew someone in public safety because it's quite the jump. I don't know a lot of folks that are, as children say, hey, I want to be a 911 dispatcher when I grow up. So I'm always interested in learning what brought you into the public safety field. How long you been in it? Do you see yourself at longevity, finishing out a career there, especially with pension systems changing and so forth? So I'm always interested to learn more about where you're from, who you are as people outside of your 911 identity. So let's look at some of the chats here as those come in. I'll tell you a little bit about me as we turn to this is going to be beyond the call. We're going to talk a little bit about AI, some of the challenges here in modern dispatch. It's really going to be your friend. We're going to talk about real-time data, the human element in AI, and so forth. So while you're putting your information in, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. My name is Sandra Wesley. Again, thank you very much for joining this session. I serve as a PSAP ambassador, servicing pretty much the Midwest for Prepared. I've been here since the early days and so proud to really be a part of this company. I've seen it really explode from its infancy to where it is today. We're in 49 states and really are on the cutting edge of technology and dispatch, and I couldn't be happier. I began my career in public safety in the early 90s, actually in 1990, and I started in EMS. I did what a lot of folks in EMS did, and as you can tell, I'm from Kentucky with my accent. But I started, I knew someone in public safety. I went on into EMS. I did that for about 5 years. I did what a lot of crews do. I got to work in a couple jobs because you could do it fairly easily. And about that 5 year mark, I did what a lot of people in public safety do is I got pretty burnt out, especially working the two jobs, so forth. So I wanted one of those jobs in dispatch. That sounded great to me. I wanted to go indoors, not having to be dealing with patients in bad weather conditions and so forth. So I went into the PSAP and thought, what have I done? The multitasking, right? The task switching, the dispatcher ear, all of those new things as a field responder. I could go in and focus on, if I had a mass incident, you're still working on one patient or you're giving commands and dictating what's happening and telling your crew what to do. But the multitasking, I believe, that happened for dispatchers was really a shock to me when I went into the radio room and seen lights everywhere. And I felt like I was sitting down at NASA. And that was in about 95. So you can imagine what it looked like. You had black screens with green lines everywhere. And I've really have been blessed in my career to see the advancement. You had two or three CAD companies back in the day, and now there's 40 something in the US. So you've got all of these things to consider. But I was able to see dispatch go from, phase one to phase two. And then in 2000, they started talking about next gen. So I've really been able to just see the evolution of dispatch over really the span of my adult life. Beyond that, I'm married to a former state trooper. He's retired and current chief deputy sheriff. My father-in-law is still on the job after 40 something years. He's been a police chief. He still works a beat. Mother-in-law was also in the county attorney's office. So this is the things that we talk about at Thanksgiving and Christmas, unfortunately, but really just an entire blue blood family. So I'm like I said, I'm always interested to hear more about other dispatchers and what your life is like, and so forth. So if you see me just asking, seeming to be too personal, please don't, because I'm just always, how did you land in dispatch? Other than that, I did some e-warrants work for a statewide project. I did spend 30 years in public safety. I was a 911 dispatcher, went on to be a supervisor. I was a supervisor for about 16 years. I worked night shift most of those 16 years. Loved it. That was my choice. Went on, came off of the floor, was a CGIS supervisor, all things Intel, CGIS, NCIC, all of those things. I enjoyed those, and went on to teach at the police academy at the Department of Criminal Justice Training here in Kentucky until I hit retirement. And then was able to go on and do an implementation project again, and then come on with Prepared. And like I said, very happy here, very impressed with the work they're doing. So thankful that the technology in dispatch has hopefully catching up with the private sector. Too far for too long, dispatch has just been left behind. So I welcome all the technology changes, and I'm hoping that you were excited about them too, because if you've survived the days that we were left in the dark, you will definitely appreciate the technology being focused on public safety now. All right. So as we dig into it, the scale of dispatch, and Nina's reported that there's about 240 million 911 calls that come in. 240 million. And if you think about your typical shift, and I'm sure you probably keep up with your call counts and how many calls that you process on a daily basis, if they're taking those numbers in, or if you're a supervisor and you're used to seeing those numbers on your reports. Think about that, just the calls that you take in a day. It may be 100, 150 if you're a call taker, or if you're a dispatcher. And please don't read too much in. If I say call taker, dispatch, or telecommunicator, we've been called everything. I know that. But that's just my lingo, my jargon from this many days into it. I've always said dispatcher, but then you have to separate the roles between dispatcher and call taker. Just know that I mean no disrespect. If you're not happy with one of the terms, there's no disrespect there. But that is a lot of calls that you are having to process just in a day. Okay. So let's multiply that times a work week, and then multiply that times what that looks like in a year. How many calls do you process within just a year's time yourself? Just you. Out of the thousands of PSAPs across the country, just think about what that does to you and the workload that it puts on you. And I know it's the job, but there is a lot of calls that's being processed, and they're not slowing down. You're going to be expected to do more and process more. So it's going to be quite interesting as we talk about these challenges. So can I get in the chat, if there's anyone who wants to add, how many screens are you looking at in a given day? How many screens do you have at your console? Ooh, I see Jared's been here since 96. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Mark's been here 8. Okay, got 8 screens that you're looking at, right? And just because they make the screen size bigger doesn't mean that it's not more information crammed on that screen. I love the 40-inch wide monitors, love them, but they've still got the individual information of 5 or 6 monitors still on that big screen, right? So you're still processing a ton of information. 7 screens, Anthony, gotcha. 8 screens, 32 years. Thank you, Mark, for the 32 years. Wow. I appreciate that. Very good. There's a lot of screens that you're having to take into, and you're looking at all of these calls, right? It's a challenge. And it's amazing what you can get used to, right? Just old now. Yeah, I feel you. I can be the token dinosaur too. That's okay. We've got institutional knowledge, right? But with that said, with all of these calls coming in, they are not slowing down. We know that. You could look at your call counts from pre-COVID versus now, and you're going to see that your calls are going up. You all were the lifeline that stayed in those centers when the whole world shut down, and they knew that they could depend on you, right? call 911 for everything, whether it's the basketball score or what's the roads like or in their worst moments. So you all really are a catch-all for whatever need that they feel needs to be met. And I really don't see it slowing. So how do we handle that? Well, we're going to talk about efficiency and boosting efficiency. So let me scroll my screen here. The scale of the problem. Well, we know that it's not one center that's suffering. It's across the country, and I've been blessed to go across the country and meet with dispatch supervisors and directors, and we know this is no secret in our industry that the problem is huge, that we've got all kinds of different challenges that we're facing, particularly with data overload and expectations. Okay, now how many folks, if I can, in the chat, are you actually responsible for monitoring some type of camera or closed circuit TV that you're having to monitor, or some type of other monitoring that you're doing for a different agency? Maybe that's you're having to look at security cameras across campus, or you're having to maybe keep an eye on certain traffic cameras. You're expected to monitor all of these things. And I know from a director's perspective and a supervisor, the liability that what if I miss something, right? They want me to monitor this, but I'm taking this call, but I'm supposed to be seen if someone went around a corner there. There's so much liability that I think that dispatchers shoulder or feel that expectation that they're going to have to. So with that said, how do we do that? Especially when there is staffing shortages, right? And I'm hoping that I'm beginning to feel like it's leveling out. And I think that I may even have a slide later in this, but between 2019 and 2020, 1 in every 4 dispatch seats was empty. That's a 25% cut. 25%. So what does that do to your folks? Right? The calls didn't stop. You're down someone. You know what it's like when someone takes a vacation, or if someone's out on FMLA or whatever the challenges are, that you're having to pick up the extra, and you're already overworked as well. So you've got all these staffing shortages with the expectation of taking in more data. So what does that do? Burns you out pretty quick. Makes you pretty tired. And I love the means of the dispatchers, getting the overtime. You hate it till you get the check, but still it does take a toll. I've seen folks that's worked overtime almost every week for a year. And how do you think they are at the end of the year? So I'm going to pause here and ask, have any of you all worked more than 40 hours worth of overtime this year? Just 1 week's worth of 40 hours. Hour here, shift here. Have you worked more than 40 hours worth of overtime this year? You'll see I'm very conversational because I don't like to just talk at you. The days of me just talking into the abyss hopefully is past. But yeah, you've averaged 40 hours a week per month. See, thank you. And people who have done more than that. So what happens if you've worked 40 hours over? That's pretty much like you lost a week of vacation, really. If they want you to work 40 hours and you take off for 40 hours, but then you have to make it up on overtime. Did you really get any time off? Did you really get to decompress? No, not really. So you've got the mental health aspect and the public expectation, right? They expect you to do it all. Plus, you add in mobile phones. And this has been a problem for a while. We know that. About 20 a month. Man, Mark, you're killing it. You're wearing me out. 20 hours a month and overtime, plus you've been there that long, you're crushing it. But you got the missed dials. You got the dead cell phones coming in. Now you got the Internet of Things, the wearables, all of this extra information that we have. And when all this information is coming in and you're trying to process maybe an injury, accident, and you're taking multiple phone calls, if it's in a busy area of your jurisdiction, you're going to constantly, all of this is coming in. Do I need to know if the airbag's deployed? You're processing all of this information, and there's so much of it to process and get it relayed, right? How many lawsuits can you look on the internet right now of where a dispatcher did not relay the information, and then that hot potato fell in the dispatch's lap when it comes to litigation. So we got a lot on our plates. So how do you fix it? Well, AI is going to be huge because there's been a lot. I know Michelle Lilly is one of the keynote speakers. I mention her papers quite often. But if you look at the difference between how the business started and how dispatch was designed for landlines, only about 20% of your calls are coming in on landlines. Usually if they're in senior communities, heavy busy business districts, maybe you've got a lot of industry where they still have a lot of landline phones. But most communities, they're looking at about an 80-20 split between the mobile and landlines. Okay, so now we just need to know that we're working mostly with mobile. It's been a complete flip to the bag phones and flip phones of, catering to just those few, to now it is completely flipped that you need to really focus on those mobiles because that is the majority of your calls. So the information that come in off mobile phones is great, right? How much information can you pull? Well, with that also comes this added stress, the complexity of the job. It's actually, I think it's a International Association of Emergency Dispatchers came up with, and I'll double check that. But, dispatchers running about 30% can be diagnosed with PTSD. And they're saying there's about 70% that's undiagnosed. Especially the longer that you're in the job. And there's a lot of key factors that are triggers for PTSD, or, and it's going to be those calls that make you feel helpless. It's like when you're trying to do translation. It's going to be those calls that involve children or officers, or where you question, did you do enough? It's those type of calls that really lead to this. And when you're looking at that, if I can have something to help me to feel like I did all that I knew I could do, I used everything, all the information was passed on, then I've done my job. But that's a heavy load, right? And so often we're not included in those debriefings, or they want to beat you to death with it. It's just a very delicate balance. So let's see if we can find something that helps us, because this has already been done for a while in the private sector. So again, let's pull this into the public safety realm and get some of the benefits from it. Again, we talked about the Internet of Things, the complexity of it. We've now live streaming is in most centers. I know that was in the Apple update, that if you've set your parameters right, all of that will just automatically, can come in. So if you're looking at videos, you're looking at closed circuit TVs, if you're looking at the callers, if you're taking information, where the units are, is the CAD making a recommendation where to go? Did I make sure that I notified them that they had a warrant on them? All of those complexities. And let's not even talk about if it's a multi-jurisdictional or a multi-agency response. Let's say you have a giant wildfire with casualties. What does that look like? Especially when you go into your incident command and setting those up, or you have to establish another channel and so forth. So it gets pretty complex. And not to think about, we're dealing with the trauma of just the call. So let's take a peek. Now, AI is your friend. It is not your foe. I'm telling you, every time we go in and you talk about AI in dispatch, the first thing I say, and that's where we lose our job. No, that's not where you lose your job. It's assistive. It's never going to take the place of dispatchers. And I like to, necessity is the mother of invention. If you think about it, Taco Bell, McDonald's, all those have the kiosks when you go in to order. And they're very cumbersome, and they sometimes drive me insane. But that was all just developed not only to save money, but they couldn't have the help. They could not get workers in those positions. So they found a way around it. The kiosks, right? This, while it's not just taking orders like a kiosk would, let's look at this as it's going to take a lot of the work off of you that you weren't meant to do. Because so much has been put on dispatch. If it was really an emergency or not, you become the one-stop shop. So let's see if we can find ways to remove some of those tasks while still providing high quality service to our jurisdiction, our constituents, while making sure that we're just doing a better job, right? You dispatch directors, you're not there. Supervisors 24/7, you do not know everything that's going on. And especially if you get those directors, or I'm sorry, those supervisors that are friends with their subordinates, sometimes, there is a reason people rotate different ways and stuff. So those friendships and those bonds to try and cover each other, or cover up, I should say, things don't happen. So let's look at some of the different things as we talk about AI. And like I said, it's not just dispatch. Actually, they had done a survey, and 60% of all occupations could have 30% of their tasks automated. What would that look like? Maybe it's an email, maybe it's an automatic response. And truthfully, you guys are already using AI just like that. Say that there's an email comes in. I'm going to be out of the office. I don't want to have to tell them I'm out of the office. So what do? You set your email, your calendar to out of office, and it automatically sends that. That's AI. Do you have a spam folder? Love the spam folder, right? That's AI. You think Netflix or Spotify is making recommendations just on a whim? No, all of that's AI. So you're already using AI. And think about in your personal life how much better it makes it. Those little things that just take something off your plate that you don't have to worry about. And that's what a lot of AI is going to do. And I have made this statement from the beginning. And of course, Prepared has been looking at this. We've actually been in the thick and working at it for well over a year. And when you get to talking to other people, oh, they're building it, but do they have it now? Do they have this now that they can go ahead and take some of this off of you like we do? Everybody is going to go toward it. You can tell that in across the board with ChatGPT and AI and all of this are just popping up everywhere. But do they offer it now? Especially if 30% of your tasks could just be automated. And with the dispatch the way it is, and so many of those calls coming in being non-emergency, I would say for dispatch that number is double of what amounts. So think about your admin calls, right? As a matter of fact, I want you to ponder for just a second. What is the most ridiculous thing that you've had someone to call in and ask? What's the most? Of course, mine, I'm in Kentucky, and the UK fans here are fanatical. Mine was, it was an emergency. They needed to know the score on the game. So if you will, pause for just a second and tell me something in the chat of what's your most ridiculous call that you got into 911. I'd be curious. I've had people call and complain that the neighbor set the trash out a day early. Just all kinds of just craziness over the years. So what are some of those? Just nothing that ridiculous, but someone called 911 for a trick or treat times. All right, then there you go. And I promise you, the longer you're on it, the more craziness you will hear from the public, right? Well, if those mundane tasks, if they're calling in, my water shut off, where do I need to go pay the bill? I need to pay a ticket. Can you tell me the visiting hours for the jail? If all of those things could just automatically be done, and the public feel that it is actually, that they're receiving a high quality of service faster than they could be having to wait on short-handed dispatchers anyway. Any call asking, what are the roads going to be like tomorrow? Oh, I love that. I have a crystal ball. And I loved it because I worked in the basement for a long time. So I'd be like, well, I can't see from here. You tell me. Yeah, I like it. The magic ball, the crystal ball. Maybe that needs to be, I may need to start putting the crystal ball on there. I love it. Great, Jessica. But you're right. The people call in for crazy stuff. What's the roads going to be like tomorrow? Wouldn't it be nice if you could just automatically just send them over to the state's website or weather.net? Well, it still gets more and more and more, right? Because you're getting real-time information. And that's great. I want to be known. I want to know, I would have wanted to know if I have a dispatcher giving CPR instructions. I would, especially if maybe it's someone in training, right? This is their first time of working a code. How are they doing? And not only that, when you're taking in this real-time information, you're really getting a better 360-degree view of what's happening. And the more you use AI, the smarter it gets. And I think that's the fear for a lot of folks. But does it have to be? If AI could say it's better by all of these calls that we've been able to process that you start compressions at this point versus this point, what is that going to tell us? And I think that as AI develops out, it is going to get smarter and smarter. So I'm interested to say maybe calls need to be answered in this amount of time, or situations start resolving themselves if it takes this long to process it. So it's going to be interesting to what the data shows as the years progress and how that will evolve as well. And then, of course, we've got to talk about improved integration. Everyone needs to be on the same page. So when you've got those big incidents going on, those 1 in 300 calls or so forth, that it's all hands on deck, and you're able to actually get real time information, whether that's through AI or live streaming. It's really going to be imperative to how that call progresses. Right? Again, it doesn't replace a human. And I used to do this big session on critical thinking, and they're not going to replace you, but because there's the empathy that needs to be there, right? And yes, you could set a bot up to be empathetic, but there's all those clues. And Mark, I know that if you've been in the seat 30 something years, there's just a human aspect that you can't change. There's that gut feeling, that intuition that you have because you've processed that many calls, and you would argue that AI would pick that up as well, and it may self-learn that, but I just don't see it. It's too complex of some of these situations, especially if maybe you've got a high terrain or a rough terrain rescue or a caving rescue or a drowning. Some of these things are just can't be replaced. But if I can let somebody else take where do I go to pay my ticket call while I'm taking a CPR call? Yeah. Don't make me put my CPR on hold because somebody else is calling in wanting to know the basketball score, right? Or if they're calling in needing to know something else that can be different priorities. So you're still going to, AI is always going to need your critical thinking. But if it's smart enough to be able to say, let's let this, we don't know, let's kick this on to a human for them to figure out. Let you do what you're supposed to do, handle emergencies, handle those calls that you were hired to take, not take care of after hours calls or nuisance calls, those type of things that don't necessarily demand a response or a dispatcher to handle. And I know that may be hard to shift from because we want to be that person for our community. And if I'm not busy, I want to just do whatever I can to solve the issue. But I don't want to make somebody have to wait 4 hours for a police response because they're so backed up on calls that wouldn't need a response. Okay. So I'm going to pause because I'm always interested. And as a matter of fact, most of the products that we have at Prepared is simply because of recommendations or complaints that we've seen from the field, from you guys. And don't get me wrong, at Prepared, I'm one of the former dispatchers there, but it's not all just about dispatchers. It's not about having a team of dispatchers, and we do have plenty, but it's about having really the best in the industry in every different roles, so we don't become so pigeonholed that we can't see outside of our own fence, if that makes any sense. Especially, I'll just get on next gen. The thought was actually brought up, and Mark will know this, back in 2000 was a concept. 25 years later, almost now, we're still talking next gen. And it's really, how could we have envisioned what that would have looked like 25 years ago? And it's evolving. So I think that when we start looking at what AI can do, what it's going to do for your center, we need to look outside of our scope. So I'm going to pause for a second. And because most of our product actually come from dispatchers just like you, and maybe some of you actually on this podcast or webinar made some of these suggestions, if you could have a product do anything inside that dispatch center, what would you have it do? What would you want an AI portion created to handle? What problem could it solve within your center? And I'm going to pause just a second because I want you to think about that. If you could get something to magically do a magic wand, what would you want changed within your center? That's a good question, isn't it? What would you want changed within your center? Can you look outside of the tunnel that we've been down, and how would you want it to change? Would you want no keyboards? I know it's a tough question, isn't it? Admin calls or alarms? Whew, we'll get on the soapbox about alarms, right? The dreaded alarm calls. There's been great studies done out of Canada where a lot of them won't even respond unless there's video proof that there's someone that's actually burglarizing the location. There's a lot of great studies of the money and manpower and stuff spent on false alarms. It's incredible. The auto, that's exactly one of the things that we have is we have a non-emergency triage. Yeah, with the 10, if anything coming in on a 10 digits, you can triage and do it. And it's not like a phone tree. Push 1 if you want customer service, press 2 if you need help with online. No, it's not like that. That's more of a tree situation, a phone tree situation where this would be actually more AI, feel more human, feel like it's a completely different experience for your constituents. Yeah. Okay. Now, we know mental health is a problem in our industry, right? Like I said, I've got family members that's been in the job more than, my father-in-law 40 something years, my husband more than 30 years as well. Um, we are who we surround ourselves with a lot of times. I usually run with police officers and firemen, and that's our public safety family, and that's who who we personally spend time with outside of the job. Um, and I see how the trauma has affected them. But the cognitive load in dispatch, like I said, when I come from a field responder into that dispatch room, I was like, whoa, give me a good multi-vehicle accident any day over this going on here. And it took me probably a year to really start feeling my way through, I believe. But the role of it in dispatch with how much is actually being brought in and the task switching, we like to say multitasking, but it's task switching. And when you switch from one task to another, it takes time and it takes mental effort to get back to where you're at. So let's say that I'm talking about this and there's something that's just popped up. And then I say, hey, can you tell me how many calls that you had this week? Or you have to turn around and do something else. Yes, you can turn around and do that task. But then you're like, oh, what was I saying? Where was I at? And you can see this on your everyday. And all of those fractions add up and it does increase cognitive load. It just does. And it do you remember where you were at? And do you remember if you had sent them or did you tell them this? That cognitive load, especially with the Internet of Things and all of these things that we're having to monitor and dispatch, it's up there right now. And that's when accidents become to happen and liability becomes an issue, right? When they're really just overloaded, and who can you blame? Especially if they're shorthanded, and are they documenting those type of things? Are they journaling that, yes, we were shorthanded today, or any of that stuff? So think about that in terms of liability as well. But again, AI is not replacing them. It's supporting them. Okay. It's an assistant. That's why we always call it's assistive technology, because there is no anticipation that it would ever replace dispatchers, right? What if it was so smart that you could dispatch from home? Ponder that one. It happens quite frequently in overseas in Europe where they do 311 calls are routed to the homes. That's a concept, right? But let's say that AI, and it does, we already do this. Let's say that it can let you know as a supervisor, CPR is in progress. There's a gunshot. Maybe there was something happening in the background. It's going to tell you that you couldn't hear it. Think about when you get a call that's in like a crowded area, or someone speaking on the side of the road and there's all this background noise, and you're not picking that up. Imagine what it's going to do that AI can pick that up and notify you that this was said. Or like the language translation is a big conversation. I think Brandy had a great point on that yesterday. Brandy Powell, one of my colleagues, when she was talking in her session, she's the 911 chaplain, by the way, and she gets to talking about the language translation. And are we actually providing equal service as we're supposed to those non-English speakers, or those that are so hard that, maybe deaf or hard of hearing? Are we as we are required to provide them an equal level of service. I would say no. That doesn't mean we can't, and we not only should, but I think we're required to do better, especially to service those communities. Okay, um, I can talk on this. I took German. I took 2 years of German, and I could barely say 3 or 4 sentences. But even if they was to call in, let's say they called in speaking something else, I can't recognize 140 languages. No way. And I think with the added diversity to the communities now, that it is you don't know what language they would be speaking. In our area, it was always just Hispanic until now there's Swahili. Or would I know it in the middle of the night if someone called in speaking Swahili? Would I even know what language that was? So where do you start from that? If AI can automatically detect that and translate it for you in real time, and you can communicate back with them in their native language through a bot, absolutely. Why wouldn't you want that? Is that not better service than those folks than what you're doing right now, trying to get language line on the phone? And nothing against language line, but sometimes it can be problematic, right? Just because they're also constrained to the people that they have on staff or who they can get a hold of. And a lot of that went downhill, I believe, during COVID. Um, and then the real time transcription. If and let me ask, I'm just going to pause here. If we can have to ask the prop people up and stand up. Okay. Yeah, I like it. Thank you. Good. So, if we're thinking about real time transcription, first of all, I've reviewed a lot of CAD notes, and so, not all typers are the same, and not all spellers are the same, right? And sometimes when this stuff gets subpoenaed, you're like, oh, sweet, not, I can't believe anyone's going to see this sometimes. Um, with the real time transcription, as well as, I mean, I can type decent, but I can't type as I'm not going to type every word on a call. I challenge that you probably don't type every word on a call as well. So that opens up a whole new can of worms, right? Versus what your retention look like. Is it different if it's audio, video, or if it's actually in written form? What does those retentions look like? And if the entire, maybe you have a year on audio and 7 on documents at wherever in your jurisdiction, whatever those parameters are. And after a year, what if that's gone? So if you've got that real-time transcription and you've got a longer retention period on that, all of that is going to be retained for longer, that you know every word that was said on that call. Not only that, but when you get it in transcription form, right, it makes it more digestible, and I can see it. I trained for a long time, and I'm a visual learner. So if I'm just constantly just hearing, and I may have missed something, but if I can see the transcription, okay, I'm seeing it and hearing it. I'm digesting that in 2 different ways. And when you get to talking about new hires, mhm, the training is so much better. And I'm going to tell you, they're expecting this type of technology. They really are. They're expecting to be able to use all of these functions that they could use if they was talking to their friends, right? And if you've not used ChatGPT, and this is not the same as that, but are you starting to use some of the different technologies? Because other folks, the new people that you're recruiting, are going to think that you had these capabilities, really. And if you're able to keep them, get them out of training, get them actually on the floor, and then they're able to use this and help retention because it's reducing that cognitive load to prevent burnout. I think it's a step in the right direction, not only for how we service the public, but reducing dispatchers' cognitive load. So if we can keep them in the dispatch center, again, Mark, thank you for your 30 plus years of service. But a lot of the workforce within dispatch right now have less than 5 years. And in Kentucky, I think it was like most dispatchers won't make it till 6 years. They will tap out. And if that's good or bad, for mental health reasons or whatever, is a whole different conversation. But there's all that experience that just went out the door with them, right? 5 or 6 years of getting them to be a really good dispatcher because we know 3 months in, they're not a great dispatcher. 5 years in, they're pretty good, but that goes out the door with them. So if we can hold on to them because we're not burning them out, we're not putting more on them that they need to process, to let them come in, do a great job, feel confident, feel the pride in what they do, does that change the outlook for your center? Do you get to keep those folks on till they hit retirement age and beyond? So I just think that it's something to consider. It doesn't increase efficiency. Studies have already showed that it already has a 20 to 25% boost in efficiency through AI, and that's just across all professions. So I'm going to argue that it would be even more so for dispatch. And yes, you have downtime, but you also, it's sometimes feast or famine in dispatch. So I would argue that those numbers are higher for us. Now, I know we're going to talk about quality assurance. We have a piece that is quality assurance, that does quality assurance in real time, and I couldn't be happier about it. If you're old school dispatcher and you're like, I don't need any protocols, I know exactly how to do this. Okay, great. But what about those folks who've been in the seat 6 months or 60 days or even just a year, right? We know that the importance of protocols are there for a reason, right? To guide you. And not every call is have protocoled out, we know. But if you think about it, your protocols, let me ask a question here, guys. What percentage, first, do you actually have a QA process? Some do, some don't. Some only do it for EMS out of requirements. Some do it for all calls. But what percentage are you actually checking now? What percentage of your calls, if you actually have QA, and please tell me if you don't, because there's no shame in it. A lot of people don't. But if you do, what does that look like for you? 2 to 3%? I'm curious. So if you will, chat that in the comment for me. I know it typically agencies are doing 2 to 3% of actual QA of their calls. They'll pull 2 to 3%, and they've actually got somebody usually on staff or somebody that's been tasked to do it while they're still trying to dispatch and everything else, right? Or you may even hire a third party to do it. I know a lot of agencies that do that, but they're still just checking 2 to 3% of the calls, and those are randomly pulled. So how is your dispatch center really doing? You're not there 24/7. You've got a ton of other things that you need to do in your role. What is your dispatch center? How is it really? I think that the fact that you can QA every single call in your center is groundbreaking. It's really going to give you a better idea of what your center's doing. Every call, if you have a brand new dispatcher who consistently misses is there any weapons involved question, right? Well, if they can see that in real time at the end of the call, oh, you missed this. Guarantee you the next time they're going to be more focused on making sure that they get that, because they're not going to want dings either. So it says, okay, you did everything great. This is what you missed. That's real-time correction, right? So the next call is even better because they'll be like, I don't want to forget that this time. So it almost helps train them. But not only that, it tells how your old folks are doing too. Maybe they've picked up bad habits. Maybe they've not asked great questions. But that lets you know how it's going as well. And are they really just nailing it every single time? And you might be like, and reward those folks that do. But that you can actually see how your center's providing service. Are they accurate in the information? Are they asking the right protocol questions that you all want to load in? Are they adhering to those protocols? Are they even saying it in a professional tone? And I know you may get screeches about that, but all of this stuff could be self-set. Maybe you don't want to determine if they are being empathetic or if they're in a professional tone. You just want to know if it hits this. All of that can be set up too. But just think too, we don't just have to limit it to what's happening now. What's it going to look like in 6 months or 6 years? And it's not out to catch dispatchers doing something wrong. That's just it. It's to let you know if there is holes in your service. And if you can use somebody who's been, if you can take that task off of them or not have to have a third party to come in and do your QAs, and not just at 2 or 3%, but 100%, that's really just monumental. And it's going to let you know, is your dispatch really as good as you think it is? Or is it better? It could be better than what you think it is. So, but it actually gives you a real look at what's happening. QA is time consuming. Like I said, so much so sometimes they contract this stuff out. And now that everything can be transcribed, that makes it easier to analyze and to find best practices. And I'm curious to see how some protocols may change of the information that AI actually picks up on protocols and pre-arrivals. It'll be interesting to see how those change over time. Thank you. Added a quote if you had a program. So let me ask, how do you guys feel about AI? Is that something that you would even, I know it's almost a scary, so it needs to be understood that it's assistive. It is not taking any dispatcher's job, and it's not being just let out there to just make crazy decisions. This could even be just set up on non-emergency lines if you didn't want it to be on 911 lines. It could be anything that you want. You got to sometimes, like I said, get outside of our own tunnel and look at bigger visions of how this can be developed, because if you can imagine it, it can be developed. That's the beautiful thing of it. And that is it's great. It really is. So I would suggest, as someone who's actually done implementations, okay, and as the director too, when you're thinking about bringing anything in, okay, do you need it? First of all, do you need it? Does your center need some type of non-emergency triage? Do you need some type of quality assurance? Do you need some type of in-call dispatch assistance that's going to give you insights to what's actually going on within that call? I would say everyone actually needs some piece of AI, but what piece of AI would best suit your center? Is it the non-emergency triage? Is it insights while you're actually dispatching the call? Is it QA post call? Is it dispatch assistance? Let's see. Let me ask you something. What would you think of transcribing radio calls? Transcription of radio. Anybody can understand maybe a volunteer fireman these days, especially if their adrenaline's pumping and they've lost their emotional intelligence a little bit and they're screaming into the radio. If anybody's had that, just say, maybe just speaking for myself. But what if you're able to have that transcribed? That would be great, right? So what needs do you have? What needs does your center have? Okay, first thing. Then you're going to want to choose your actual vendor. What tool do you want? What vendor do you want? And when you do that, just make sure that they're aligned with what your goals are. Do they have great quality customer service? There's nothing worse than making that final payment and then you can't get them on the phone. Trust me, I've been there, right? And you're like, man, there's a reason people hold off on payments and so forth, because they want to make sure that they got what was promised. Make sure that you choose a vendor that's got great customer service, a reputation, that they're, going to offer support 24/7. Make sure that you look for that, and that their actual goals are aligned with yours. Is it a company that you feel that gets dispatch, that's trying to do better in dispatch, that is just trying to, are their values aligned with yours? That's something that you need to consider. And then you need to train the team. And when I say train the team, I don't mean walk in and say, we've bought a new product, here it is, now you have to use it. When you're doing implementation, especially if you get some people who have been in the seat for a while and I've always done it that way, you may want to bring them in early on and just ask their opinion, or be like, I trust you, I need you to run point on this, right? You allow them to take positions of leadership and advancement that they may be craving. And not only that, then you have to go in and have great training for them. Make sure that they offer training, your vendor does, and that they offer extended training. Is there other free trainings? Is that part of what's involved, is the training of the team? I can give you a product. If they don't know how to use it, it doesn't matter, and they really need to understand how to use it. So make sure that you get the stakeholders involved early. Let your responders know what cool tools that you have and what technology. I bet a lot of times that you would be surprised at what police officers didn't know you could even do video streaming and so forth. So let your responders also know what you have going on while you're training the team, or even bring them in on the training. And then after you actually get something, measure its success. Don't just buy it, set it, and then be like, we never used it. Or did they use it? A lot of times I'll see dispatch directors go in, they'll put something in. Yeah, we told them they could use it, and we don't know if they used it or not. Well, why did you buy it if you don't know if it worked? You may have members on advisory boards and so forth wanting to know how it worked out, and you say, oh, it's worked good or whatever, but actually measure that success. And there's tools that you could use, and the company, that the vendor that you choose, will be able to supply that information for you. What your metrics look like, how your people are using it, how many times is it used, those type of things. So when you implement something like AI and you're looking at different AI tools, not only assess the needs, make sure you choose a vendor that aligns with your own values, make sure that you're training the team, everyone's on board, they understand what's happening, and then measure the success. And your success will be linked to each part of those earlier three. It will. So if you're going to have a great implementation, make sure that you start at the beginning. Find something, the tool that is right for you. Maybe it's all, get a great vendor, make sure that the team knows, or you're going to get some pushback from your team, and measure that success. So as we're coming up on 10 minutes to the end of the session, I do want you all to remember some key takeaways. AI is not the enemy. It's not replacing any jobs. It's taking just some of this mundane, everyday, routine task off of you guys. It's going to help you make better informed decisions. It's going to help guide, I think, the future of how protocols work within the U.S. anyway. And then I'm going to pause for questions for anything that is just anything that you want to talk about. If it's AI related, if it's live streaming, if it's translation, if it's just about how long should I stay in dispatch, whatever you want to talk about, and I'm happy to chat with as we go on for the next few minutes before we wrap up. And as you do that, if you want to add any questions, feel free to do so. This is my contact information, guys. I am a PSAP ambassador. I am here to try to just service you. That is my entire goal. I want to service whatever needs you have, whether that is writing a policy. That's what my master's work is in, just so you'll know. If you need any type of leadership, the different types of leaderships that you may want to look at as far as leadership theory, if you just need some training, if you need a speaker to come in, whatever that you need, I'm here to service 911 centers and PSAPs. So feel free to take my information down. I'm happy to come in and just service you however I need to. Okay, I've got a question here. What are the myths or misconceptions that you've heard in reference to AI? One, that it's a big scary thing, and that it's taking dispatcher's job. That's always the first concern, that it's taking dispatcher's job. It's not. And this is what I like to say, and I'm going to let you ponder this, okay, as we go into our closing. If you're a director or not, just envision this. If you have your staff that you have right now, okay, and you do not hire one person, but you do not lose one person, okay, there's no change in your staff. In 10 years, with all the additional information coming in, can you sustain what you're doing right now? If nothing changes and the technology keeps coming as it's going to, can you sustain things the way they are right now? Right? You may be doing well, feel like our heads above water, we're fine. But I would challenge that. I would say that most people, with the way the technology is changing, that there has to be some type of assistance to help with this pain point of the short staffness and the overload on the dispatchers. Oh, is there any other questions? And I want to thank you all too. I've been a little under the weather today, so I appreciate you just sitting and listening to me talk about dispatch. And again, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to scan the QR code if you want to learn more about Prepared. It's a great group of individuals. It really are. They're just fabulous. And I think that you'll be fascinated to see what's actually happening. Any advice for people who might be on the fence about AI or the new technology? Just take a look at it. I think that you will be surprised at what it actually looks like. Just take a look at it. Have a demo, regardless to the vendor. Just have a demo. Take a look at what AI is doing right now. And like I said, you're already using AI. Let's just use it to help us for a change instead of pick out what song or what movie I should be watching on Netflix or what's in my spam folder or, you know, what TikTok algorithm that is going to show up next. Let's use it for something that's going to help us. And I say us, but us. I get to say that since I was in it so years. I'm still a dispatcher at heart. Just saying.
Thank you very, very much for an excellent presentation. And one of the things that I love is how every single one of you that I've ever met, how open and, because there's some companies out there that I know that you have probably also dealt with in your past in public safety. And a lot of people have where when you're asking questions, it's all about just their company. But just listening to you and what you've said, it's not just about your company. I mean, you literally said for people to actually look into it, go through it, go to someone who has the your best interests, right? And I think that's one of the things that I love is that you're not I guess like monopolizing, right? It's not just the one thing. Like you want to be able to help out with every single thing and ask questions. And I think that's one of the biggest things as well for a lot of people, especially with new technology and AI and how you were saying like people are afraid that that it might take their jobs. You guys are willing to explain and show so that the fear part is not there, so that people don't freak out when it's you not so much hand holding, but you know what I mean? Like you're able to walk through with them and say, look, this is a cool thing. This can actually help with a lot of stuff that you're doing. We're here to assist in, in any way. And I think that's one of the things that I love the most about what you all do.
I think that competition is great because that drives innovation. And if we can do that in
Mhm.
public safety, I'm all for it. Like I said, feel free to look around at other vendors, but really give it consideration because it is going to help your center and your dispatchers. So, yes, thank you.
For sure. Awesome. Well, everybody who's watching and listening, thank you for everyone being here. Make sure to hit that QR code, find out some more information, get a hold of Sandra, get a hold of Brandy. They have excellent folks working there, very knowledgeable, and have been where you are at in the chair. And that is, I think that's one of the things that I love the most as well is that you have folks that come from dispatch and you're able to talk to it. You're not just another tech person who's coming in trying to tell dispatch how to do their job. That doesn't ever work, right? So you want to have someone who comes from there. So again, reach out to Sandra, reach out to anybody that's there and hit that QR code because all of this is going to be available on demand forever. It's not going away. You will be able to check it out anytime you want. A big thanks to Prepared once again for being a gold sponsor. And thank you very much. I appreciate you all. We will be going to the next session that'll be starting here in about 15 minutes or so. So we will see you all in that next one. Sandra, thank you very much for what you do once again, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Y'all have a good day.